What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Kicks and Picks podcast. Nick and Scotty here. We are kicking off the summer with a very special series of episodes. We are going to cover some of the top clubs in Europe, and we are starting off with AC Milan. We're not going in alphabetical order, but there just seems to be so much going on around this club, and we have a very, very special guest, a longtime follower, supporter of the show, and the man who has probably the longest running Milan blog that I've ever heard of. So that is AC Milan Michael Lisi. Mike, thank you for joining us, brother. What's going on?
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to jumping into the unknown with Milan this summer. So it's going to be interesting.
This is Scotty's, this is his Christmas. He loves the offseason. He loves the transfer market. And I think he really loves diving into what's possible and what's in front of us.
Yeah, the transfer season is so much fun because it feels like, even though the average person knows better that, you can't win a trophy in July or August, but it really dictates like how you feel about, or how you feel going into a season. Like, are you, looking for trophies? Are you hoping just to get top four? Are you pessimistic because you've had to sell off one of your key players to Bayern Munich and you're not very hopeful of the players you brought in? And it also tends to give itself some other storylines in the upper echelons of the different offices too. And so I think that's why it's great having you on, Michael, because we know there's been a lot of drama unfolding in Milan lately, especially with how ownership and management have been interacting lately. So even though there's no matches scheduled, it doesn't mean that there isn't any drama going on in and around these clubs in Europe. So it's always a fun time of year, and it's always good to kind of try to find a way to sort out the truth from the rumors, so to speak.
For sure. And Mike, the first thing we want to get into, man, I'd love for you to tell the listeners just a little bit about what it is that you're doing. As I mentioned, you guys are putting out some phenomenal content that we've been riding along with for quite some time. How did you get into this club? Tell us about you. Tell us about the channel. We know you're really active on Twitter as well. Let the listeners know what's going on and how you came to love this club.
Well, probably, in the beginning, when I was younger, like in high school and all that stuff, I was never a big soccer fan, but I had a bunch of friends that were. And just happened to be that the first summer we were all home from college. We all got jobs together, and we all went back to one buddy's house and we watched the 94 World Cup. It was the summer of 94. And because I'm half Italian, my team instantly became Italy. And of course, there was all the drama with Baggio on the team, and Baresi getting knee surgery right beforehand. And of course, with Italians, it's always gotta be the hard way. Their group, they finished tied with the other three teams in the group and just squeaked away on like goal difference. And I was just like sucked in from there. And here's was this Baresi guy and this Maldini guy that I liked watching, and they happened to be Milan players. And at that time, it was kind of hard to truly follow it here in the States,
Brutal. Yep.
Unless you were lucky to have what is it, RAI on your cable or whatever, which trust me, in Ohio, we did not. You had ways here and there. You got your random Champions League games with Tommy Smith and JP Dellacamera doing the play-by-play, the color and all that stuff, and all that sort of thing. So that was kind of the only way to truly, follow it for a while. And then, of course, over time, with the internet and then, tons of cable channels and all that kind of stuff, it just got easier and easier and easier to follow the sport. And then, of course, eventually, jumping into, blogs and chat boards and, all that kind of stuff. It just slowly built and took off from there.
I love it. I think it's hysterical that you said before the internet, but it's true, right? There was like a
100%.
2-hour Sunday morning match on like PBS that like simulcasted Rye. And it was either that or you picked up a copy of OG somewhere at like the, a specialty newspaper stand. And that's how you followed the team. So unfortunately, I remember it well.
Yeah. And unfortunately, with my friends at the time, I mean, my one friend had a Subbuteo board him and his brothers played in the basement, which, I mean, some people probably still don't even know what that is. You know, the soccer with the little figures and all that stuff. They had magazines all the time. I mean, they were heavy into it when it was really hard to get into it. So those guys, which, you know, a lot of us are still friends to this day. I mean, they were kind of my gateway drug into the soccer world. So
love it. Appreciate that that background, that little bio.
Yeah.
So dude, before we get into what's ahead of Milan, let's take a quick look back at last season. We'd love to get your thoughts, just a general assessment on how they performed last season across all competitions. As a reminder, they did make the semifinals of the Champions League, finished fourth in Serie A, so 2 points behind Inter, beneficiaries of, I think, the Juve point deduction, but heading back to Champions League next year. What do you make of the 2023 season?
You know, it was interesting. That first stretch there, we played really well. I think the only blip along the way was a loss at home to Napoli, which I think Leao missed for one reason or another. I can't remember off the top of my head. Anyways, and then we went into the World Cup break, and I thought, and I actually wrote a big long piece on it, we had one of the teams in the league that had almost nobody going to the World Cup. We only really had like Teo and Giroud, and Maignan was going as the backup to Lloris. So my thought was, oh, well, we don't have all these guys that are going to, you know, get worn out during the World Cup. We'll be fresh for the second half. And turned out I was completely wrong, because we stunk coming out of the break. Honestly, the first 6 weeks after the break was our toughest time of the year. Maignan got hurt. Tatarusanu had to take over in goal. I'm sure, you know, and which also happened to coincide with when betting became legal in Ohio, which turned out to be a complete disaster for betting on Milan at the time. and then that rough period really led to a stretch run where it was like, you know, okay, we can navigate staying top four, hopefully, but then the focus kind of flipped to the Champions League, and you know, we made our way past Spurs, even though Tatarusanu, I think, had to play the first leg. And then, you know, we beat Napoli, which, you know, with, as far as I'm concerned, was, you know, a little bit of just desserts, I guess, after having a very mediocre season. To at least be able to knock them out of Champions League was nice. And then we ran out of gas against Inter, but, you know, we kind of got a gift from the footballing gods with Juve's point deduction and still finished fourth. So really, at the end of the day, you know, a Champions League semifinal appearance and holding on to top four, considering a bit of a roller coaster ride during the season, really wasn't that bad. Some people disagree with me. They would say that Pioli should be fired and Maldini rightly should have been fired and everybody should go. But to me, I got no complaints. Every season is different. Every season stands alone. You know, you can't compare anything to the year before or the year after. So, and I thought, you know, for the most part, they did okay. I was happy.
Yeah, I think there's a few clubs in Europe that, coming off a season where you make it to the semis in Champions League and then you qualify for the next season, albeit no trophies to speak of, would consider that like a bad season, right? I mean, you can probably count it on one hand the clubs where fans could legitimately make that claim, and although you wouldn't respect them for it, you would understand, right? So I think that's totally a fair assessment. I will say, I think I will take credit for Milan's turn of form at the end of January, because going into that derby with Inter, I took the over because Milan's defense had been terrible all throughout January. And then, of course, that was I think they still lost 1-0 to Inter, but after that, they went on a streak of defensive prowess that had not been seen in years. I will take a little bit of claim for that.
They were, we pretty much played, I think 13 guys behind the ball, if that's legal, and just tried not to concede goals for a while. I think just to remember how to play defense there. We had I don't even remember the Sassuolo score, like 5-1. The Lazio kicked our asses like 4-0.
4-0, yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Look at that.
That one I remember. That was like maybe I was wrong about Saudi this whole time. Like that was that match.
Oh, okay,
You
okay.
know, like I was second guessing my own stance on him, but
Sure,
that was
sure.
definitely a fun one for us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that was one of those where it was maybe like an afternoon game, and I kind of laid down on the couch, and after about 5 minutes fell asleep, and fortunately woke up around like the 90th minute, and quote unquote missed that game. So I wasn't disappointed.
Whatever you have to tell yourself, Mike.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So you're happy with the season, and again, I'll agree with both of you. I think it's really tough to try to measure it against the Scudetto winning season the year before. I don't think many people expected Napoli to be as good as they were this year. Deep run into the Champions League, it kind of wears on you. So finishing top four, always going to be a success. Agree with you there. How about on a personal level? What do you make of the players from last year? Is anybody that stood out to you that maybe overperformed? Anybody that was a little bit disappointing? Who's on your mind from the starting 11?
I think as far as like improved or really over, I mean, honestly, and it sucks to say it right now, I thought Tonali was finally just about hitting his peak to the point where, like, this coming season, I expected him to take a little more of reins of the offense, not just be a defensive midfielder, but really be somebody that could do pretty much everything up and down the field. I mean, for me, he was the MVP of the team and the MVP of the season. I mean, Leao was spectacular. I mean, he was just as good as last year. Had a little bit of a lull in the middle, but obviously played great. Giroud played great. I think the only thing that was kind of a letdown is I think there was a few guys like I thought Tamori kind of took a step sideways. He was fine, but he didn't improve. I don't think he jumped up a level or anything like that. Kalulu was kind of the same way. I think after last season, especially the stretch we had towards the end of the year last year with Kalulu and Tamori as the center back partnership, when they gave up, I can't remember what it was, like 3 goals in the last 12 games or something crazy down the stretch. I think everybody expected him to really take off, and he kind of had a so-so season. Like I said, not really a step back, but more of a step sideways than anything else. Um, I'm a big fan of Salamakers. Everybody gives me mountains of shit about that, but I love the guy. But he was kind of the same too. We had a bunch of guys that, the year before really stepped up, probably played, above their pay grade in winning the Scudetto. And then this year, I think maybe because of that, people thought, oh, wow, they're going to jump up another level. And they kind of went sideways, if not backwards, a little bit. So I guess that kind of covers both ends. Obviously, Magnan, I mean, that guy, he's just amazing. He blows me away every time he steps on the field. But I mean, that kind of covers, as far as guys I thought that improved or took a step forward, and some other guys that I don't know if disappointing were the word, but you kind of hoped they would take that next step. And most of those guys are still young, so it's not the end of the world.
One thing I'll say, and I'm coming from a coach who has a 13-man rotation, right, for 11 guys on the field. Milan, Milan didn't have that same approach. I feel like Pioli definitely rotated a lot, or I know a lot was, some of it was due to necessity, some was due to injury, but you mentioned some of these guys who maybe didn't necessarily improve the way you expected them to. Salamakers was the one that stood out to me. These guys didn't get consistent playing time, right? They weren't always in their preferred position or formations. I feel like we're changing. Is that kind of a fair assessment as to why maybe guys didn't take that step forward, or am I completely off base?
I think that's fair. I think if like you said, your coach plays with, an 11 and a half man rotation, and Pioli wants to play with like a 19 man rotation, the happy medium is somewhere in the middle there, right? It's probably 14, 15 guys. I mean, very few teams are going beyond, that number 14 or 15 guy. And I think that was probably the trap Pioli fell into there as we stayed in the Champions League, is he really got carried away on the league games in rotating guys like crazy. And maybe he should have, as we got down the stretch run, maybe tightened up that number a little bit more. I think that's fair to say.
Cool. So speaking of Pioli, how do you said he did well. How safe would you say his job is? I mean, what are his goals for next year? What does he have to do? I know the fans are kind of split down the middle, at least from what I see.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what's going on with him.
I personally, I like him because I think he's already shown the ability in his time at Milan to do the change his tactics, change formations, try some different things. Like you said, mid-season when we couldn't play defense at all anymore, he changed everything. I mean, it was ugly, but it kind of settled the ship, So from that aspect, I like him. What I don't like is a new regime and a new ownership, a new, general manager, technical director, whatever you want to call them. Every club calls it somebody different. Keeping the old coach. We did this before when the Chinese took over, and we kept Montella as the coach. And it was a total disaster because they brought in a bunch of guys they wanted. And then Montella later in the window, they let him pick like 3 or 4 other guys he wanted. And it turned into a total disaster. We bought like Andre Silva that summer, who basically never played for us. We bought some other guys that hardly ever played. And then Montella brought in these guys that were like his favorites. And then before you know it, they canned him, which I guess is a long way of saying I don't like the idea of a new ownership and GM keeping the old coach. I think they would be a smart move, and I think more than anything fair to Pioli to go get their own guy, because I can just see us getting like 8 or 10 games into the season and these guys deciding Pioli isn't the right fit, and here we are in like November looking for a coach.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that seems to happen a lot in Serie A to an extent, but it also happens in the Premier League, where you have these coaches that, you go into the season and you feel like they're on decent terms, but all it takes is like, the first month to have a string of 4 or 5 bad results. Then, questions start popping up. And I was curious if you thought Pioli is a candidate for one of those guys where like, hey, if Milan get off to a slow start, like we said, they qualified for Champions League, but certainly beneficiaries of Juve's points deduction there. Do the ownership's ambitions kind of, align with what Pioli is capable of, or does he stand to be a guy that finds himself out the door midway through the season because he's not quite pulling it as quickly as they'd want?
That's exactly what I think is possible. Now, like, not that firing a coach that early is the worst. Like when Maldini hired Giampaolo there and he lasted 8 games, that was like the best move in the world, because Maldini and them, I think, were smart enough to realize that the guy that they basically handpicked was not the guy, and he had to go. Now, in this case, this isn't the guy they handpicked. So I don't know how much of a leash Pioli's going to have. And I hate the idea of getting to like November and being like, okay, who are we going to find to coach this team?
Right.
I mean, the coaches are gone.
Right.
That we've always said that on this pod, right? When we've talked about coaches that should be, if they're on the hot seat or if they're going to fire them, whether it's on Tottenham or, anywhere. And I always say you can't really fire a coach in this day and age unless you have his successor already lined up, because that's kind of how you find yourself in these, situations where like Chelsea were in, where you're trying to just find like a caretaker manager, and the results just get worse and worse. And then next thing everybody's feeling bad about the club, and it's harder to even get some of those, bigger name managers through the door, right? Because it just becomes like this dumpster fire that a lot of people try to avoid. Now, granted, at a club like Milan, you're always going to have that level of attraction that, you don't have to worry about, anyone turning you down necessarily. But if there's somebody that you really have in mind and they have their choice of clubs, that could be enough to kind of turn their head to a different direction. So.
Well, yeah, and like you just said there, Chelsea's the perfect example. They did that with Tuchel last year. I can't remember how long exactly he lasted, but you almost knew right away that he was going to be headed out the door, and it just ended up being a black cloud for them all season.
Yeah, I think Tuchel lasted 8 matches, and then they bring in Potter, and then I think he made it like 18 to 22 matches, something like that, and then he was out the door, and rest is history.
Yeah, but yeah, that's that's kind of my opinion on Pioli. But then also, like I said, what I see happening, which isn't really what my opinion isn't to get rid of the guy, but my opinion of the whole situation is find your own dude and let's go.
No, I think I wasn't expecting you to say that, and I think that's a smart, fresh take. So, definitely appreciate that insight there. So let's get right into the summer. Scotty's going to shine here. So games are just about over, right? These national teams are just wrapping up. Transfer market opens next week. I want to say, like, officially. I mean, like, it's you could sign people.
Oh yeah, July 1, I think.
Right, July 1 is like official.
Yeah.
Yes. So let's talk about the squad. What's the biggest area that needs improvement, and is there anybody that rumored to be targeted? Is anybody that you'd like to see come on? What's the outlook for purchases?
Well, I'll just go like back to front. So keeper, obviously we're fine, although Mannion always seems to get like a decent injury every year, but they already picked up Sportiello to be his backup.
Yeah, good move.
Improvement after last year. I mean, that's fine. That's great. The back line is fine. I mean, you got Tamori and Chow are probably going to start next year, and Kyer will be, he'll be the old man, the wise head. He'll be able to play 15, 20 games. He doesn't have to play 50 games, so he's fine. Teo's obviously is fine. Calabria is what he is. He drives me crazy sometimes, but like last year, I think everybody really hoped Kalulu would take that spot, and I think with a new management group and all that kind of stuff, maybe some of the loyalty to Calabria goes out the window and Kalulu becomes the guy. So the back line's fine. The midfield's a complete disaster because, well, first of all, you sold your best. I'll say it, your best player. I love Leao. Don't get me wrong, but if I'm drafting, I'm starting with the center mid, not the left wing. And Benacer just had knee surgery, and he's out till like the first of the year. So basically, right now you have no midfield. And Brahim went back to Real Madrid. So you play a 4-2-3-1, and both of your sixes are gone, and so is your attacking mid. And the way I see it from watching, coaching, writing, everything in the world, you start an NFL team by working on your offensive line, and you try to keep those guys together for a long time. And same thing with the midfield. And we're going to be marching into next year, probably starting 3 midfielders on day one that have never played together and don't know each other, which is terrifying. So yes, that's a giant hole. Left wing's obviously fine. Giroud is going to be fine up top. I'm sure we'll find somebody to help him out. Right wing, every Milan fan will tell you right wing's been a problem for a couple years. So, probably in some sort of order, it's the 3 midfielders easily. I mean, you've got to pick up at least 3 guys to fill those spots, maybe 4. And then maybe a right wing. I don't know. There's Chelsea's having like the biggest fire sale in the world. So
yeah,
their guys are basically clickbait fodder for every team around the world at this point. But yeah, those are my 3. Those are the big spots to fill. The back line and keeper is fine, which is great. That's we can work.
You want to start there, right?
Oh yeah. Now, like as far as like guys, I don't know, dream guys or guys I would love to go get. I mean, I would call Fiorentina yesterday and try to get Amrabat, and I don't care what it would cost, because I think that's a guy you can throw in as a 6 on your team, and he's like plug and play. I don't think it matters who he knows, who he's playing with, or anything like that. That would be one guy I would love to go get. Honestly, as far as the other ones, I mean, there's all sorts of guys out there. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. So, I mean, I really don't have any like dream targets off the top of my head, but I mean, selling Tonali does mean there's a lot of money to spend. So it's going to be an adventure.
That's my favorite part about when you're a club that sells a player like Tonali, and all of a sudden the appearance is you're flush with cash, right? That whether that is true or not remains to be seen. I know obviously a lot of times in Italy, these players are sold out of necessity for other reasons, not necessarily to, stock up the transfer funds. But once
Yeah.
that happens, it's like all the rumors come out. You start getting linked to every player with ridiculous prices. I'm glad that you mentioned Chelsea and their fire sale, because I was just looking through it, and it's like you guys have been linked to Pulisic, you've Loftus-Cheek, which seems to have some maybe validity to it.
Yeah.
Which would be a decent fit, I would say.
He's healthy.
I think he's a good player if healthy, but he's also kind of struggled in Chelsea's churn and burn academy.
We're gonna start a drinking game where anytime anybody tweets about Loftus-Cheek and the word "if healthy,"
yeah,
you need to drink.
All right,
because that is the buzzword with that dude.
Yeah, that's fair. And I also just saw recently another guy that is in every transfer rumor. I think every single transfer season is Adama Traore. Supposedly he's been linked in with the little Portuguese connection.
Yeah.
So you're definitely getting your right wing covered, but I hear what you're saying on the midfield. It seems like that's really the area of need with, at least in the first half of the season. I'm curious though. You didn't really talk too much about like a 9. Ibra is retiring, so he's out. Giroud is 36. I mean, not exactly in his peak form anymore. So it seems like that's also an opportunity, unless we see Leao drifting inside more often than not. But
is Origi still around? Is he like signed through the year?
He's signed for like 3 more years.
Okay.
For like $6 million a year or something insane like that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's I almost think that's like the one signing that like Cardinale and his buddy saw that they just can't get out of their head, that no matter what else Maldini did, that was, and it turned into a complete flop. It was a total disaster. I mean, all the guy had to do was score about 8 or 10 goals and everybody would happy. And I think he had 1.
Hey, nowhere to go but up.
Yeah.
He had 2 goals. 2 goals in protecting my guy.
No, so I mean, I think Scott makes a really good point, right? Between him and Giroud, like to me, that's like a slight step above Roma and like Tammy Abraham and Andrea Bellotti, right? Like that's not going to cut it to try to make top 4 again, to make a deep run to the Champions League. I agree. I think you guys need a forward, and I think you need one badly.
Now, here's my question. What's going on with Diaz? Because he went back to Real Madrid, right? But if Madrid are looking at maybe adding Mbappe, which happens every summer, so it may or may not happen. Probably won't happen. But it's not like they're in need of depth in that position right now. Like they have it covered. Is there any chance of him returning to Milan? Did he enjoy his time there and then he would be open to a move, or is he trying to stay in Spain and kind of get into the national team a bit?
I think he's gone for good. I think it seemed like that was even something either he or, Madrid or somebody decided a few months ago, because that was almost announced like a week after the season ended. So it seemed like he was definitely planning on going back, and that was it. He was not going to get picked up by Milan. Now, I don't know, who knows? Maybe that was an issue that Maldini had with these guys too, but I don't know. But yeah, he's definitely gone. When it comes to the striker position, it kind of leads me to the interesting thing I think of the summer for Milan. The last 3 years with Maldini had a clear plan. It was so easy to figure out like what transfer rumors were legit and which ones were BS. I mean, he pretty much kind of stuck to his guns. There were only a couple exceptions. Giroud was one of the exceptions. Origi was definitely the other one. But other than that, for the most part, it was guys like 25 and younger that he could get for, really decent, really cheap price and give, a pretty reasonable salary to, 2.5, 3 million. You looked at any rumor, you kind of jammed it through that filter, and you could figure out real quick what was going on. With this group, there's no history. These guys have not come out and said a single thing with as far as like, what the plan is, what the tactics will be, what, anything is going to be. So we're really like kind of jumping off into the unknown with what the strategy is for the summer. And that's what's going to make it kind of terrifying and very interesting at the same time, is you really don't know what to believe at this point. You don't know what rumors to believe. and you don't know what these guys, MO is when it comes to a transfer market. So it really leaves it totally up in the air.
The one other guy I wanted to bring up that I wasn't sure about, I know he was on loan. Is Bakayoko heading back to Chelsea? Is he sticking around? Have they said anything?
Oh yeah, no, he's gone. He's gone.
Okay.
I think his contract is finally up with Chelsea, if I'm not mistaken. After being
that
on
was
loan,
a move gone awry pretty quickly. So
yeah, because he was on loan with us, and then he was on loan with us again, and then he was somewhere else in between.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
He got wrapped up in Chelsea's loan army pretty quick. I mean, he never really panned out for them.
Oh yeah, and we were on the opposite end of a bunch of their guys. I mean, they gave us Fernando Torres when they didn't know what to do with him. They gave us Bakayoko. They gave us Pasalic. They gave us Van Hinkel for a year. I mean, we were on that. We've been on that Chelsea loan train for about 6 or 7 years now.
All right, the last guy I want to get your thoughts on before we move on to management. What about your boy CDK? You didn't mention him.
Oh.
I assume that's because you agree that he is potentially the biggest flop in the history of flops. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, he was a total disaster this year. His confidence was absolutely terrible. He looked lost, confused, lack of confidence. I mean, just bad in general. He did have a couple opportunities where you're like, if he could just score a goal, just one, everything would turn out fine. There were like these games. He would come in the last 10 minutes of games, and it was like somebody brought in like their 12-year-old brother, and they were trying to get him a goal.
Tagged along in practice, right?
Yeah. It was so bad. I mean, even like, the couple token appearances Ibra had, which, I mean, he was totally done coming into this year. Even Ibra was like trying to get the kid a goal. It was like they were trying anything in the world, and it just wasn't happening. He just doesn't seem to have the speed of thought and like turn of pace to make it. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe listen. Yes, they spent 30 million on him, but they gave him like a 5-year deal where he makes like 2 million a year. So it's not like they spent 100 million on this dude and gave him $10 million a year.
Right.
I know 40 million isn't peanuts in Serie A, but it also shouldn't be enough to break the club. But yeah, I don't know, dude. I'm not seeing it. Like I said, every bit of his body language and every bit of everything I feel when I watch him doesn't see it happening. So I don't know.
That's kind of where I land on him, on watching him. Right. And I think you mentioned it. Right. Listen, you got to give the kid probably more than a year and a half to try and adapt. It's not going to be easy. But that being said, everything you talked about while watching him, I think I can't remember one moment where I said, oh, okay, no, he's going to figure it out. He doesn't look like he's close to doing that. And he just was with the Belgium under 21 team in the Euros that's going on right now. He had no goals, no assists in 3 games. He missed like a wide open goal. I don't know if you saw the highlight. It was going around Twitter. I mean, you can't blame that on Milan. So like this dude just doesn't look like he has it.
Well, and here's the thing, I think coming into this year, the idea was, okay, we have Brahim one more year on loan from Madrid. And I think the hope was that by the end of the World Cup break, De Ketelaere would take that spot. And then it didn't happen. And then I think at some point Diaz decided he was out the door. So all of a sudden you went from, hopefully having 2 guys for that spot to, like I said, having nobody for that spot. And now your whole midfield is just a giant black hole.
You briefly touched on it, but let's really get into it. A little behind the scenes at the club. I made notes to talk about ownership, the managers, right? The sporting director. Maldini left. Quit, fired, both. Talk about that a little bit because the Milan Twitter seems to be a little upset.
Yeah, it's funny. All year you had the whole Maldini out contingent. And then all of a sudden he finally got fired and all those dudes were real quiet, real fast. They're like, uh-oh, maybe we wanted him out, but maybe not like this. My guess is they sat down with him and they had their plan, and Maldini was just absolutely not on the same page. And maybe they gave him the opportunity to quit, or resign or whatever. And, he probably wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. So he made him fire him. I mean, that's what I'm guessing happened with that. And then, like I was saying earlier, now it's really, it's a step into the unknown. There still hasn't been they announced the hiring of Moncada, but there was no press conference. There was no opportunity for him to explain what his plan is. Like I said, there's no plan. There's no, there's no nothing. They have laid out absolutely no direction for the club this summer. For the last 3 years, we knew that it was Pioli, it was Maldini, it was a 4-2-3-1, and we knew that we were going to try to buy dudes 25 and younger on the cheap. And now we're again, we're kind of stepping into the unknown side. I don't know what to expect right now. All I can say is the silence. The silence from their end is deafening right now, and that to me is kind of what's worrisome.
And I'm sorry, remind me, where did Moncada come from?
He was one of our scouts. I think he did scouting for different teams, but I think he was one of the guy. I don't know that he was necessarily employed by just Milan, and I could be totally wrong about that.
Okay.
But I think he was just a scout that a lot of people had a lot of trust in.
Gotcha.
A lot of people took his opinion.
So this is going to be his first real chance.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And now it's okay, dude, you could spend all summer saying, oh, yeah, I told you to buy this guy, that guy, this guy, that guy. But, well, guess what? Now, pardon my French, your ass is on the line to make this decision.
Buy him.
Everybody looks like an expert, when it comes to transfer rumors. You could all sit back and say, oh, yeah, I told you so. I told you so.
Right.
Well, guess what, buddy? Now your ass is on the line. And you got to build something, and maybe something's happening behind the scenes and we don't know, or maybe nothing's happening. So a lot of folks, I think as every day goes on and we don't hear anything and we don't see, there isn't even a face of the team right now. We always had that before. It was Galliani, it was Maldini. Even for those ugly years, it was, oh God, what were those two idiots? They did the triple handshake thing, Fassa, Mirabelli and Fassoni. Those those two goofballs. They did the signings with the triple handshake thing and all that stuff. But at least we always had a face of the team. Now it's there's not even a captain of the ship, so it's hard to say what's going on. Hey, 48 hours from now they could sign 3 great signings, and I'll be the happiest dude in the world. But right now it's a little scary.
All right, fair enough. So, talked about the team. We talked about Maldini. We don't know what Jerry's plan is. There's a lot of unknowns going on right now.
For sure.
I'm going to ask you the impossible then. What is realistic expectation for the club for next year? What do you think their goals are? What's a acceptable finishing position? Can they take home a trophy? What do you think is in front of us, knowing what we don't know?
Yeah. Great question. I think the expectation for Milan and Lazio, Roma, Juve, Inter, Napoli every year, top 4 is that bare minimum expectation. For better or worse, we don't take Coppa Italia seriously, so that's kind of never been on my agenda. I think one year recently we made it to a final or something. I don't know.
You guys need to get an energy drink sponsor to get on that shit.
Apparently so.
Seriously.
Yeah. Well, Inzaghi is just has all of a sudden become the Lord Master of that competition.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Anyways, but yeah, top 4 is the bare minimum expectation. You know what I mean?
Okay.
That's it. Whether you start like crap and finish strong or vice versa, that's the bare minimum. And then, whatever happens the rest of the summer, I think, obviously affects what other expectations there are. If you get some exciting dudes, then, we at least go into the year positive and we see what happens. So,
all right. That's fair. We're asking you this question on June 27th. So what we will do,
Yes.
before the season starts, we will quote tweet you with this and say, hey, have your expectations changed. We're not going to hold you to the very first episode, before July even hits, but fair enough. I think top 4 is a pretty good goal.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Sorry, to be honest too. I mean, even during the banter era, the era of which was just a total disaster. I mean, I was always at least hopeful every summer. It wasn't realistic, but I was at least hopeful. This year, I think, even with what's going on and the chaos that is happening at this moment, I think top 4 is still a very reasonable expectation. It's not like we're going into the season, with some of the guys that I don't even want to start mentioning names because it'll just make me want to cry. Back then, top 4 was a hope, but not an expectation. I think top 4 is still a reasonable expectation for us.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I think, I remember 2 summers ago, Milan returning to Champions League in the same group as Liverpool. There was a lot of hope there, but there really wasn't a whole lot of expectation. The team was relatively young, inexperienced in terms of European competition or Champions League competition. So they were, happy to get decent results, but again, not exactly trying to get to, the knockout stages right away. If that they did, that's great. Otherwise, no harm, no foul, just happy to be back. And then last season, it almost feels like you guys skipped a step and you got to the semis, for better or for worse. Would have preferred to not lose to Inter in the semis, but still a semifinal in Champions League is a good season. You get top 4, albeit with, a little help from, Juve. But then like the last few weeks to a month feels like a lot of that has been thrown off track, right? You had all this progress, like it's expedited, and then, chaos is thrown in the middle. So it's hard to say, like, what do you expect? Because I think if you guys had a repeat season of last season next year, I think that would be totally acceptable. I mean, even without the chaos that's going on, I don't think there'd be anyone too upset about it. It at least shows consistency that, hey, you can get to, the semis on a regular basis. It's not just a fluke year that, like Roma did that one season where they made it further than they have in a long time. So, but now with so many question marks in terms of who's on the squad, who's getting sold, and who's going to be coming in, that's kind of why I like the summer season, because it really is like a blank slate a lot of the times with these teams, and you can come into it with a team that's in, great form and all the momentum in the world, and just some weird, bookkeeping and other, non-sporting reasons can throw that progress out the window, or the other way around, right? Like you could be in a terrible situation, but all of a sudden you have an owner that becomes super motivated for one reason or the other, decides to throw his checkbook around. And next thing you know, you've got, 4, shiny new toys coming into the squad that gives you all the excitement in the world. And you go from having this really down in the dumps feeling about your squad to, feeling it's Christmas morning. You just can't wait for the season to start. So I can totally understand where it's just like there is a big question mark. But I think realistically with Milan, usually they'll be fine. I don't see them dropping off, and we'll talk about it all the time. The Serie A, it's like everybody's just going to be dropping points. You're not exactly trying to keep up with these, Galacticos type squads typically.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's fair too to be confident. I mean, you got your keeper and your whole back line back, and that's a group that now has been together for a couple years, so they really know how each other plays, stuff like that. I think another, positive too is, I mean, you think about the Champions League run and, selling Tonali. I mean, if you want to sit there and do all the math, I mean, there's about $150 million at their disposal. Now, if they spend any of it, who knows? But if you want to, really get positive and excited, and the other thing too is, hey, you got your back line and your keeper, and you still have Leao and Giroud on the team. Worst comes to worst, the first month of the season, you just pack the box and dump it out deep to Leao, and you're still going to win some games. So, yeah, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I think that's a hell of a point. I mean, I'm thinking of Milan. I'm thinking of Lazio, right? Lazio had, I think, the second or third best defensive record this past year. And, you're coming from a team that's been bleeding goals for the past 10 years, right? But if anybody had scored outside of Napoli, I feel like Napoli was the only team that was just consistently putting in goals. If any one of these other teams could have figured that out, if anybody else had a 15 to 20 goal scorer, who knows what the season would have looked like. So I think there's definitely a lot of optimism for any of those tier 1 teams, I guess I'll call them.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. I think anybody 1 through 7 has a chance to start off red hot and run away from people.
So give us, you mentioned top 4 realistic goal. Give us your one crazy, not even July yet, prediction for next year.
Well, you're gonna hate my guts.
Never.
But I like sorry. I love the fact that last year, so that first year they scored goals like crazy and they gave up a ton. I think they like scored 66 and gave up like 64. It was amazing. Like every game was 3-3. Anyways, so last year they bought him a defense. And I think you guys scored maybe a few less goals than the year before.
Yep.
But gave up like nothing. And you signed, our boy Romagnoli, who, trust me, not one person at Milan shed a tear that he left. Not
right.
one, not even me. And God bless him. He's the face of the banter era. He stuck it through it the whole way. Anyways, that I see him. I see them pulling crashing out of Europe as he is wont to do, and really making a run in the second half of the year. And I think they're going to stay right in that top 3 hunt the whole year. I think anybody that doubts Allegri is completely insane with what that man did this year. With that completely garbage team he had.
Agree.
Was amazing. Amazing. He should have been, I mean, honestly, if you don't take away the point deduction, they finished second, right?
Third.
Okay. But on a ton of points. I mean, not like a distant, like right there with Inter. Anyways, the man pulled off practically a miracle. I mean, Chiesa was not 100% at any time of the year. I mean, coming off the knee injury. Vlahovic, basically, I don't know what's wrong with him. He just is a disaster. I mean, you're starting guys like Quadrado and DeCio still, and, all that kind of stuff. That man's a miracle worker. That's why, honestly, so before I scrolled down to your email and saw the odds, Juve would have been the one team I would have been like, ooh, that's the team I'll take a flyer on for next year. But obviously, they're still only like, what, plus 300?
Yeah, listen, hey, you stole my thunder. I was going to get into it. This is a betting show. Let's go right into it then, Mike.
That's the direction you were going. But yeah, those are my two teams. I'm not betting on Napoli. I'm not betting on Inter because I think Inter really has like the Europe bug at this point. I think they're really gung-ho, and I think they can do it. So I wouldn't go for them. To me, Juve and Lazio are the two teams I'm thinking about going to win the whole thing.
Before we move on, I will say I want to give my one on a limb prediction for Milan this year. I don't know if this is a big limb, but I'm going to go ahead and say I think Leao 15 goals this year. I think he's a 20 goal scorer this season in Serie A. I think he had something like 70 shots. He's averaging 2.5 shots per game last season. I think his finishing at times was a little loose, and he could have easily gotten across that mark this season. So I think with probably a little bit more emphasis on him being probably the lead guy now, with, as we talked about, Giroud getting up there, and Origi being rather disappointing, albeit we still don't know. Maybe they bring in somebody else that's an incredible goal scorer, and that might even help Leao, to be honest with you. But I think he can be a 20 goal scorer next season.
Oh, I agree. Speaking of Leao, I think of all the guys that the World Cup break messed with, it was probably him the most. He had a decent start, and then he went to the World Cup, and that idiot coach they have at Portugal played him about 15 minutes a game, even though I think he scored once or twice. And he was not the same until like mid-February. The World Cup break was just terrible for him. And then he went on a run at the end and scored, 8 or 10 goals down the stretch. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. That probably should have been this season, but it'll definitely be next season.
And if he does, Milan is a great pick at plus 500 to win the league.
There you go.
So let's go. Let's quickly just run through the odds, Mike. I want your take on it. So right now the futures, again, it is June 27th. Inter are the favorites. They are plus 200. Napoli plus 250 to repeat. Juve at plus 333. Milan coming in at plus 500. Roma plus 1,000. Lazio plus 1,200. Atalanta plus 2,800. And then a very steep drop off of Fiorentina at plus 8,000. So, Mike, you kind of tipped your hand. You said Juve is probably your pick, plus 333. Lazio value play at plus 1,200. I would love to see it. Scotty, what are your thoughts on these numbers here?
I don't love any of them. If I'm gun to my head, Nick, if you love this game, gun to my head, I'm probably taking Juve at plus 333 just because they always seem to be there. They're the ones that are most consistent. I could see Napoli dropping off a cliff this year, right? Inter, they did look good at times last season, but I don't know. I don't know if I'd want to take them at plus 200. So not getting too much more juice at plus 333 with Juve. It just feels like the best pick out of the bunch.
Yeah, I like I said before I scrolled down, I really thought the Juve would be 400 or 450. I was shocked to see them only at 300 or whatever, 330 or whatever. I was shocked. I thought for sure Napoli and Inter, and rightly so, would be the clear cut favorites, and then I thought there would be a next tier with like Juve and Milan, and no, they clearly have Juve closer to that top two than the fourth spot. So.
Yeah, it's they seem to be one of those teams that's always a little overvalued. I think there's probably as much, if not more, turmoil around that team this year than any of the rest. And maybe them not being in Champions League gives them a little bit of a leg up. But I think for me, gun to my head today, Inter or Napoli being the two favorites here, I think that makes sense, right? I think they're the strongest, most consistent, most complete sides right now. We're not taking a future at either of them at those numbers. You can get those numbers for them at any game, on any single bet during the course of the season, right? Sure. I do like Milan at plus 500. I think they have a realistic chance at winning the league. And I'll kind of agree with you where I think Lazio is the next best value. They're a better team than Roma. They finished in second this year. They had a phenomenal year. It all depends on what kind of reinforcements come in. But that's where I would go today. I think those are the two. I'd be really interested to see how these futures look in a month or in 2 months, right before the season starts.
They're going to shift.
That was the question. Yeah, that was the question I had for you guys because betting only became legal in here in January. So my experience with international soccer, which is going on right now, and the offseason is basically zero. Will these odds go up? Will they fluctuate quite a bit in the summer, or do they tend to not really move around till the season starts?
Yeah, they'll shift. I mean, somebody will make a splash signing, right? Like if Vlahovic came in, those odds would shift. A player of his caliber, they would shift pretty significantly. And likewise, if somebody gets sold, right, then it also goes. So,
like if Napoli sold Osimhen, that number probably goes
100%
way up. Okay.
Or Kvara tears an ACL during international play, right? Like those things will shift pretty quickly. So, it's always riskier now. And like, I wouldn't touch any of these because neither of them are great value, right? Like the only time you're taking one of these, if you really like Roma for some reason or Lazio, but otherwise, like you can wait. You don't want to be the guy taking Milan and then all of a sudden they decide they're not spending a dime of that 150 million that you mentioned earlier.
I'll tell you I may have told Nick this story, but the first bet I placed, the very first bet I ever placed on Bet365, it was like a day before Juve played Napoli. And at that point, Juve was only like a couple points back. And if they won that game, they would be only a couple, maybe 1 or 2 points off of first going into the second half of the season. And the odds on Juve winning the league were just insane at that time. I can't remember what the number was.
Sir, I believe they were plus 800 because we talked about it on the podcast. And I took that bet as well.
That was the first bet I've ever placed for real money in my life. And the next day they lost, 4-0 or 5-1? And then the day after that, the points reduction was
Yeah.
announced. Yep.
That's Nick's
So,
fault. Nick also placed that
forever-
bet at the same time. Cursed it.
that will be my worst first bet of all time story.
All right. Every guest we have from here on out, we're going to see if they can top it. Do you have a
Yeah,
worst
I
first
just
bet?
I think all your guests, you need to have the most.
We're going to add that segment in.
Absurd. You'll need a name for it, but yeah, like a crash and burn bet or something that just went horribly wrong almost immediately.
Love it. Well,
Which, by the way, I think because of you guys, I'm still holding on to my Austin FC wins MLS bet. So,
man, looking like we were pretty wrong about that one because they're struggling a little bit.
I think I only put $2 on it. So it's
all right. Well, no, it's pretty. I mean, still a good chance to win a ton.
Yeah,
they were like plus 1,200 or something like that.
So, anyways, yeah. Sorry, I just had to share that story with you guys.
We love it. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
And thank you. Like we said, you've been a longtime supporter. We appreciate that. We appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and your expertise at this club. For one last time, tell the listeners where they can find you and find all your work and what you guys are up to this summer.
You can find me at AC Milan Michael on Twitter. Our Twitter handle for our blog is at FDL_1899. It's the second iteration of our blog, but we've been running nonstop since the original guy founded it in 2007, which is hard to believe at this point. But yeah, we usually post at least 2 or 3 things a week. We always do game recaps. We do some statistical and tactical stuff. And then every Friday, I always do I call it my weekend whip around. It's kind of a preview of the weekend's games with, some picks and some ideas for some different bets. Nothing too crazy or serious, but I think you can pick out some fun little nuggets from it. And we've got a great bunch of commenters, and we just have a fun time.
Hell yeah. Check it out if you haven't already. So that'll wrap up this episode. Thank you again, Michael, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.